I've had many experiences with Bigfoot, but I mean, the main experience was in April 20th of 1997. I had a sighting in Coshocton County, Ohio. Totally unexpected, not planned, anything like that. I was going to check on an alleged beaver, or excuse me, not beaver, badger den. There was, some hunters the previous fall had told me about seeing badgers by this old strip mine. And of course, back in 1997, badgers were not known to be in Ohio. So I was quite interested in the story, and he told me all the details and everything like that. But I wasn't able to get over to that area until the following spring, which was April 20th of 1997. And when I went over to the area, and I had some real good directions that he had given me on how to get there, and I found the area just as he was explaining, and so on. And there was three of us that initially hiked in, and then one left maybe about 20 minutes after we got to the area where the dens were allegedly supposed to be, which we did find them, but we didn't find any badgers. And he went back to his car on the dirt road, which was roughly about a mile and a half back. And we just kind of waited until he got to the road. And when he got to the road, he called on the radio and just said, "Hey, I'm at the road. I'm heading over to the other side of the lake." And you could actually hear his vehicle in the distance driving away. And then the other guy and we just were there talking. I was standing up on a coal pile, and I said, "Hey, let's just, when we go back, let's just go the easiest or the least path of resistance," which was just going straight rather than going down to the little tier of the strip mine that we hiked in on. And we just, as long as we kept the high wall to our left, we'd eventually dump out on the road where my Jeep was parked. So it wasn't much of a big ordeal. And so we started hiking out. As we hiked out, we got maybe about 5 minutes out, and all of a sudden to our left, we heard all this commotion up on the hillside above us, which would be just the next tier of the strip mine. When you think of a strip mine, think of like a staircase, and the trucks would drive on each tier out of the coal mine, taking the coal out. And then of course, when it all grows into woods, if you look real good, you can kind of tell that it's tiered, if you know what I mean. And so on. But so we stopped and we looked up on the hill, didn't notice anything. It was barely just past bud. So, I mean, there was some green, but not a lot. And so we just assumed we spooked up a bunch of deer and just kept hiking. And within another few minutes, we heard a bunch of movement again up above us. And we stopped and looked again, nothing. And so we started going. And within another minute, more movement. We stopped, kept looking around, didn't see anything, but just kept hearing stuff moving around. We just assumed it was a big family of deer bedded down up on the ridge above us, or the tier above us. And so I finally said to the guy that I was with, I said, "Hey, why don't we just do this? Why don't you just take the lead? I'll give you like a 5-minute head start and then follow you out, and maybe we'll spook the deer up and one of us will see them." And he said, "Yeah, okay, that sounds good." So he just left and I just sat there. And 5-6 minutes goes by. I decided to get up. I was just sitting there on like a log and didn't hear a thing. Birds were chirping, everything was normal. Started hiking out. I mean, within a minute of me walking, I heard all the loud commotion again above me. And so I kept looking up, start walking. Whenever was up there was making noise, I'd stop, it would stop, I'd go, it would go. Well, then I got to the point where I was getting really uncomfortable because there was some rumors going around there in that area. There was a black panther around, or a cougar. And I'm thinking, don't tell me this is a big cat. And so I basically, only thing I had like for protection, I had a can of bear mace. And so I pulled that out and I kind of had it in my hand. And as I was hiking, I was kind of trying to look over my shoulder up on the tier above me to see if I see anything. And as I would go, I'd hear movement. As I would stop, it would stop. And it just went on. And eventually it got to the point where way in the distance, I could see the dirt road because I was coming up from a high point going down low. And I was getting to the section of the strip mine where it started to all tear down toward the road in the distance. It was roughly about 500 yards to the road. And so as I was kind of hiking, I was kind of getting worried that it was a cat. And I decided that, well, you know what? If I decide to run and try to run out of there, it's a cat's going to come chasing after me, which we both know. And so I did. So I just started hiking down the decline, going down to the flattened out area of the beginning of the mine or the strip mine, and I just decided to sit down in the trail. And when I sat down, I listened. I was expecting to hear all sorts of movement, and I didn't hear anything. And I was like so surprised because that was the first time I didn't hear any kind of heavy movement up above me. And so I kind of just listened, nothing. And I just decided, well, I'm going to stand up slowly. And there were some pine trees or low growing pine bushes to my left when I stand up, I'll look over the top and see if I see anything. And just as I was getting ready to just stand out, I heard plain as day right over the top of me, like crunch, 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 right over the top of me. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, Lord, that's not a cat. And of course, like, most people will say, well, what'd you think it was? Well, I didn't think it was a Bigfoot. I had no clue. But what I thought it was a person, because that part of Ohio, especially back then, there was a lot of people that were growing pot in the wildlife areas, and they would have people that they would hire to protect the pot. And a lot of times they'd be armed with shotguns or handguns, and they would, scare you out of there and follow you out. And so when I decided to stand up to look over the bushes, I stand up and I'm looking. There's nothing there, and I just couldn't believe it because I heard it plain as day. And so I looked back down in the distance where my vehicle would be parked, and I looked back up the area I came, didn't see anything. And as I kind of panned back to the right, I kind of looked up at an angle, maybe about 70 feet away, up on this tier of this strip mine, and there was this black object squatted down in the woods, and it was like behind a tree, but the tree was it was looking in the direction of this tree, going in the direction of the road. And when I saw it, the first thing that came to my mind was like, oh my God, it's a black bear. It was jet black in color. Cool. So I had a full backpack on with all sorts of cameras and gadgets and stuff. And I went to take it off, and it made a whole lot of noise because it was one of those metal frame packs that you backpack with. And so when it made the noise, this thing goes to stand up. And when it does, what I'm expecting to see, a snout and big long ears on top, immediately when it turns its torso a little bit and starts rearing up, I could see the ear on the side of its head like a person. And then I noticed its flat profile on its side view of its face, and it turned and looked at me, and it just was like shocked. And as I was shocked, I almost fell off the tier of the strip mine behind me because I took such a big step back. And it saw me, and its jaw basically kind of open, like doe, like how'd you hide from me, like that expression. And so immediately I had my pack down on the ground in front of me, and I go to reach in for my camera. And as soon as I made the move to reach, it immediately turned and walked up the tier, out of up over the next up onto the next plateau. And I don't know why I did this. I just out of excitement, I dragged my bag and camera over to where it was standing, dropped the bag, and went running up the tier trying to follow this thing. And when I got up to the plateau where it was going, I couldn't see the creature itself, but I could see where it was going because there was no wind that day, and the trees were just, going back and forth in the direction it was moving because that was going through them. And so I was filming in that direction. And the funny thing is, it's like I couldn't hold the camera still because I was shaking so violently. And so it got to the point where I had to like stop recording and just try to get myself under control because I was hyperventilating, I think. That's the only thing I can think. And and then lo and behold, I finally got my composure and I started recording again. And I'm filming in the same direction where this thing was moving toward. And then to my left is where the whole tier of the strip mine made a big turn. So I was kind of right at that little corner point of the turn. And on the next tier up, the only thing I can explain is that take a deep freezer full of food and dump it down a hillside. It sounded like an elephant was coming down the wood line at me. And I got so scared, I panned my camera in that direction away from the original subject. And, I started filming, and, of course, I'm looking through my camcorder trying to see whatever it was. And, and I was a brand new camcorder, and I had never used it in the field yet. So it was like a whole new experience. And then all of a sudden, as I'm like freaking out over this experience, I hear my name being called. Well, the guy who went back to the car, he came back up the trail, and he was calling my name, like, "Where are you?" And I heard him call. Finally, I yelled for him. He comes up and hikes up the tier where I'm up, and he comes up to me, and he sees me filming. He looks at me, says, "What, did you just see a ghost?" And I'm like, "No, no, 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 Bigfoot, Bigfoot." And to make a long story short, it was just one of those experiences where I had an opportunity to have an amazing film, and I didn't do it, and it was just disappointing. But it was something that, because it happened, it's that's why I'm still in this field, 26 years later. Well, when it stood up and then it walked up the tier, I saw the branch from the tree by it, hit it in the head. It bounced up. You could see the branch shaking as it went up the tier. Well, the only smart thing I did that whole time, I put my pack by that tree, went up after it. When the other guy came up, with me, and I'm filming, and I'm like filming, and I could see something up on that hillside, but I was so freaked out. I mean, I was like literally going in shock. And the other guy looks at me and he goes, "What do you want to do right now?" Because he wouldn't go. I asked if he would try to walk around and try to flush it out, and he wouldn't do it. And I said, to be honest, I just want to go. I was terrified. I really was. And so I literally went home, but I did one smart thing. Where my pack was, I took my orange hunter tape, taped it around, did a bunch of strands around the tree, and left. Well, the next week, a week later, I came back with 10 people to look for tracks. And because it was like, 160 miles from where I live. And of course, it had rained that whole week. So from April 20th to April 27th, the foliage went from like this to this. So if I wouldn't have put that hunter's tape on that tree, we wouldn't have been able to find the spot. And we had 10 people, and one guy found it. And so from there, we measured the height of the branch off the tree where it hit it on the forehead, and it was 8'11" off the ground. It was huge. It was so physically built, muscular, massive upper body, huge quads, thighs, butt cheeks. I mean, because the side profile, you could see that pronounced butt cheek. It like the muscles were huge. It was jet black in color, and like I tell people, when you see the blackbirds that
Yes.
are kind of pester us, okay, and they kind of get that blue iridescent hue and sunlight on their feathers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the Bigfoot's hair actually had a little blue glisten to it, which was kind of interesting in the sunlight. And it was very, very, let's say, healthy looking, because it was so muscular. It looked really in good shape. And it went up that hill like nothing. When I went up after it, I'm grabbing onto every branch, every tree I could to pull myself up. And it just went up like it wasn't there. And people always say, if there's one word I could explain, about it, what would it be? And to be honest with it, it was beautiful. It was absolutely just amazing looking. And the funny thing is, I called. That land was part of the Muskingum Watershed District, which is the Corps of Engineers in that part of Ohio that does all the flood control. So it was their land. So I called them the next day on Monday, and I said, "Hey, I was hiking over at Wills Creek, and I saw a large ape." And you know what his response was? His response was, "Which one? The black one or the reddish brown one?" And I'm like, "Excuse me?" He goes, "Oh, you're about the 25th person over the last 30 years that has seen these things." And I go, "Really?" And he's like, "Yeah." He goes, we're the Corps of Engineers. We just care about the floods. Other than that, we don't really care about anything else. As long as he asked me, "Did it try to hurt you?" I said, "No." He goes, "They never do." And he goes, "Which one did you see?" I said, "The black one." And he says, "Oh, okay." So it was kind of an interesting thing. And so that was really kind of one of those things that's like, wow, these people know about it. So it was kind of interesting. other encounters have been all the different, of course, hearing Bigfoot's yelling, throwing rocks at you, moving around the ridge tops at 3 in the morning and just pacing you. I mean, I've had wood knocks on both sides, yells, excuse me, all different kinds of experiences over the years. And just, did I have another Class A sighting? No, but I definitely caught a glimpse of something running up the hill with three other people. We could hear the footfalls. It was so quick going behind the tree line, but we definitely saw it go behind the tree line. But it flew up the hill like lightning on 2 feet, and it was clearly taking big steps. I've been involved with the Ohio Bigfoot Conference since like 1995, and my friend Don Keating was the original organizer of it. He was holding events as early, I believe, as 1982 or 84. But back in the day, they were just tiny little events because most people wouldn't go to an event like that because you didn't want to be ridiculed, made fun of, things like that. But he was looking for information on who was seeing what and where, because there was a lot of stories of Bigfoot-like creatures in East Central Ohio where this was being held. And eventually he ended up getting out of Bigfoot, and I took over the conference in 2012 was the first year I did it all by myself. And but I had been helping him since like 95. So it's at Salt Fork State Park in Guernsey County outside of Cambridge, which is in East Central Ohio. It is a massive lodge with cabins and everything. I mean, there's like 145 rooms and like 50 cabins. There's a campground in the state park that's like 300 sites. And during the weekend, which this year is May 6th of this year, that weekend, we every room, every cabin is all Bigfoot people, 100% all Bigfoot. And then we have a gigantic vendor fair where we have like over 50, 60 vendors that set up on 3 levels in the lodge, food trucks outside, and just all sort. People dress up as Bigfoot. It's just a big family friendly fun event because it's the perfect venue because there have been Bigfoot sightings right by the lodge over the years. And it's in an area loaded with historical reports and encounters. So people go there, they camp there, they bring their families, they bring their, everything, and it's like basically a giant Bigfoot bash, and people start coming in on as early as Wednesday and most on Thursday, and they stay to usually till Monday. So the state park is just loaded with Bigfooters for like 4 days. And of course, you know what happens during those kind of weekends when you have all those people. Everyone has a Bigfoot sighting, of course. And everyone thinks they found tracks, and which of course you got to take that with a grain of salt. I always tell people the healthiest Bigfoot investigators are the ones that keep their skepticals on, because even though I've seen one, that doesn't mean you should believe everything you hear. And I'm sure you know that. So. Well, and I think what people have to do is, like, if you're really dead serious into looking into the Bigfoot phenomenon and you're out in an area where you're thinking, that these things are coming through, you got to be prepared. Like, for example, in my thing, I had my camera in my bag. You should have your camera out in your hand or a GoPro. So if something happens, it's already filming and ready to go. You should have an audio recorder going as soon as you get out of the vehicle. Before you open that door to get out of the vehicle, you need to turn that recorder on, and say the date, time, and everything. And when you get out, because a lot of times people just get out of their vehicle and they hear all of a sudden 2 wood knocks and a yell, and that's all you hear. So if you have your recorder going, you'll catch it. And so I would tell you people, be prepared, be ready, and don't put your guard down. And don't rely on your cell phones, because your cell phones are not really capable of taking high quality video, especially moving video. It's different if people are standing still, but a Bigfoot doesn't stand still. So you have invest into some good equipment. Be probably the best advice I can get. The Ohio, at one time before deforestation, it was like a huge oak and hickory forest from the Ohio River all the way to Lake Erie. And if anyone knows, anything about ecology or dendrology, which is the study of trees, you want if you're a predator like Bigfoots are, they're definitely eating Ohio's deer. They're gonna find those deer in areas that have a heavy mast on the forest floor. That would be acorns, different kinds of nuts, and things like that, because they need to eat their calories too. And so you would look at areas in Ohio that are heavy oak and hickory population, which a lot of it is, and of course with water too. And I always tell people for Ohio, you put your finger on Cleveland, go straight down to Columbus, and then angle over to Cincinnati and go anywhere east of there. And that's good potential area because we have north south water flow, which means we have rivers that flow north up the Lake Erie and rivers that flow south down to the Ohio River. We have many large water rivers in the state. We have many lakes in the whole east central part of the state. So there's tons of water, tons of food, you know, and very lack of natural predators. And if you don't have wolf populations or mountain lion populations that can impact a deer herd, your deer become mammoth size. And Ohio has many record-setting deer that get taken during hunting season out of here. And another thing that's really interesting is if you look at Ohio's deer harvest every year, you could literally take historical Bigfoot sightings and overlay it over the top, and it's going to pretty much match those counties of high kills in the deer hunting season. So it's pretty cool. Oh, I think like some of the best honey holes would have to be between like going down like from Kentucky down through Tennessee into like that Mississippi, Arkansas area. Those areas are so vast. The population density is very small in most areas, and there's lots of mountains there, and just and they do have a good metaphysic type forest that would benefit creatures like this. And I think those are areas, even down into Georgia, places like that. I think there's just so much potential. And just remember, if you don't have good investigators, a lot of reports are just basically just get swept under the rug. You never hear about. So if you have a good network of investigators like Ohio does, you're going to hear a lot of stories, and I think that's part of it. I'm the Ohio curator for the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization, which is the BFRO.
Hmm.
And so I've been in that organization. It's over 20 years now, I think. Yeah, it's pretty long. And like I say, I'm the Ohio curator, which is kind of like a higher position, I guess, in the organization. And I have a lot of investigators that I work with in the state, and we have a really good network in the state, and we do a lot of good work, and it's very time consuming, but with some good luck and just some setting your hopes in reasonably. I mean, we do have a lot of stuff. I mean, our expeditions that we do are quite successful. People have had sightings on these expeditions, and have heard wood knocks or heard yells, and we've got great recordings. So there's just a lot of stuff. I mean, that the factors to play, but Ohio's definitely doing quite well with Bigfoot population. Well, I mean, there's plenty of Bigfoot reports. Some of the cool ones I like are some of the hunter stories. I mean, you get the hunter stories. I had one where the guy had got a deer, got it dragged out, threw it in he had put it in the back of his pickup truck, and he just goes off into the woods to take a quick leak, and he turns around, and a Bigfoot is reaching into the back of his truck, pulls the deer out, and walks away with it as he's standing there. I mean, literally with his pants down, I guess. And but it was kind of an interesting report because he just happened to look over, and there's a squatch, and it grabbed his deer, and and he said the way he just grabbed it with one arm and just flicked it over his shoulder and walked into the woods with it. It was like free food, and very interesting. And then some of the others would be like some bow hunter incidents where I had a county sheriff tell me of when he was bow hunting, having a Bigfoot come up to his tree stand while he almost fell asleep and reached up and shook his tree stand and woke him up. And when he looked down, there was this massive creature there looking up at him, screaming at him. And he said it took every bit of God for him not to just totally faint. He was so scared. And he said even when it left, it went up over the hill, and he was terrified, shaking. And he says it even came back and looked over the hill and yelled at him one more time, and it just really scared him to death. And he said, I had a 45 sidearm on my hip, and he goes, I don't think it would have done anything to that thing. That's how big it was. And he said it was angry too, so it was very agitated. He was up in that tree stand. I mean, there's been some aggression, but it's typically when people are the aggressor first. And I would, if people tend to be aggressive, they're going to be aggressive back, because they're just like anything. They're just like people when it comes in terms, if you threaten them, they're going to defend them and their families. And one thing with Bigfoot is, when there's one Bigfoot in the area, there's more than one. If you see one, believe me, there's two others that are watching you from somewhere else. So if you mess with them enough, you can get them agitated. Yeah, they can be aggressive. I mean, will they kill you? I doubt it, but I mean, they're going to let you know that they're there, let's just say. I mean, especially at nighttime, they'll throw stuff at you, they'll scream at you, they'll scare the living, what out of you. I mean, believe me, I've been doing this a long time. And yes, there are times I have been scared at night where if I didn't have something to put my hand on to hold on to, my legs turned to jello, like a boxer getting knocked out. That though it was making so much noise that, I mean, literally, I couldn't. My legs, I just wanted to let go. It was the weirdest feeling ever. But I was like, I just put it this way: thank God my vehicle was close, because I got the hell out of there. I think part of their success is these small family groups where you maybe have 2 to 3 females with the kids. And then when I say kids, they can be small all the way up to like teenagers. And then the big dominant alpha male, he probably has a big range where he visits each female group from time to time. And that's like when you hear the stories about like the big long yells they do, that's probably the alpha males calling out to their females, like, where are you type thing. And so there's definitely like these alpha males, and these alpha males are the real 9, 10, 11 foot tall ones, massively sized creatures. And if they have to get involved with anything, it can get pretty scary, I'm sure. And but there's definitely, I think in Ohio we have probably at least 2 or 3 alpha males that have territories, and then they have their females and kids just broken down into sections. And like I say, they wander far, and that's part of their success. And I've never got that information out of one. I tried to get an ID from the one I saw, but it didn't work out, which is a joke, of course. But I have no clue. I know Dr. Meldrum, says, gorillas can live 40, 50 years, so I'm sure Sasquatches are probably in that same boat. But, maybe even longer, because they walk upright like we do. So, perhaps, I would think it has to do with food and health. I mean, if you can keep your knees and your joints healthy, I think you can live a long time, especially in a family unit. Best identifying marks in Ohio are their calls, their yells and whoops. They're very distinct. We pick them up on our recorders from time to time throughout the state. And it's usually in areas where there's been sighting reports and things like that. And it seems like they're very vocal in Ohio to communicate between each other or groups or whatever. And that seems to be the most distinct thing, because we have a shale clay-based soil here. So in terms of tracks and everything, it's real hard to find a lot of tracks. Not that we haven't, but it's very, very uncommon. You have a better chance, I think, of having a sighting than finding tracks. And then what is a Bigfoot? I think a Bigfoot is some kind of relic hominid. It obviously walks on 2 legs like we do, so I think it's pretty closely related to us. I think somewhere in that evolution chain between like Homo erectus and so Australopithecus and Gigantopithecus, it was something that split off that was never charted on the chart, let's say, and it probably, when the Bering Strait was connected to Asia from North America up in Alaska or Russia, they followed the food over, and so did the Native Americans follow the food over the original inhabitants. And then, of course, they became isolated in the North American continent and filtered all the way down to South America, because they're seen everywhere that Pangea was part of it. There's, stories of a Bigfoot-like creature. I think, the woo, they can think whatever they want. And I'll just tell you this: I've been investigating. My first interview I ever did with a witness was in 1989 down in Tippecanoe, Ohio. And since then, I've probably interviewed over 330, 350 witnesses. And when I say interview, that's on site at the location of their sighting. And I will have to say, not one of them ever had any story or embellishing in their story saying that they saw a flying saucer, saw an alien, saw ghosts with it. It was always a flesh and blood creature. Excuse me. And I mean, have I heard stories of it? Yeah, I've heard stories of it, but not in Ohio. I heard a lot of stories in like Western Pennsylvania, but not in Ohio. I've never had a report that I took like that. And I'll be 100% honest with you, in the field at nighttime, down in Southern Ohio, Central Ohio, East Central Ohio, I've seen strange things in the sky. I've even filmed strange things that I don't know what it was, but I filmed it. And I just kind of you can even hear me on one film saying, oh, I better not tell MUFON about this. They'll get all excited. And, it's just one of those things. So is there other things out there? I'm sure there is. Are they Bigfoot related? I don't think so. Well, I mean, when the campground opened in the early 70s, I believe it was 72. Well, you got to think about that whole area used to just be, woods and a farmstead. And it was pretty much, how should I say it? Uninhabited. I mean, for many, many, many years. And then all of a sudden they built a state park campground and they open it opening weekend and people are cooking food, buying pizzas, and it was a packed place. Well, the dumpsters start filling up with food. Well, when the sightings started happening that opening week, it was always over at the dumpster. They were coming down from the woods, smelling the food and going through the dumpster, pulling stuff out. And I mean, the rangers that were working there at the time had Class A sightings. They even at the mini station they had where the dispatcher was, like, literally had one looking right in the window at them as they were on the microphone and punched the guy. He punched his hand right through the window and had to get like 70 stitches. I mean, there's a police report or a hospital report on that. And he said that a big gorilla looking face was looking in the window at him. And so there was that first week, there was probably 7 or 8 sightings just in that first week. I mean, so it definitely, started off with a bang, let's say. But of course, Bigfoot's, part of their success is being shy and elusive. Once they realize there's going to be people there all the time, then the frequency of reports got less and less and less because they moved farther out, farther away from the park, deeper into the wildlife area, deeper into the other private property woodlots, and that's what they do. They're very good at staying away. I think there's more TV reports. I think there's easier ways to report your sightings. And when you have easy effort to report sightings, I mean, think of it this way, Linda. If you want to tell a great sighting report, you can go on the BFRO database, read for a week all these interesting reports, and then you can sit there and combine and make up your own report, submit it. And if you're good enough to trick the investigator, you might have what they consider a legitimate report. And so in terms of fabrication, misidentification, people that just want to think it's a Bigfoot, that's rampant. Are there still legitimate reports? Of course there are. And but the problem is, I think the numbers of quality reports are far less now than they were, say, 20 years ago. It's so trendy, it's popular, it's mainstream, it's easy to hey, anyone can report a Bigfoot sighting now. I mean, like I say, it's simple. And if you have a simple way to report something and you just want to get off and playing a joke on someone, you'll see. I mean, I always have a rule of thumb in investigations is this. And this would be, and this is a good rule of thumb. If you typically get a report in and it's usually already a month old, and if it's anything like that, where it's nothing that just happened, where you have to get to the scene, I sit on them. And what I mean by that is, rather than calling the witness that had just sent it in, I'm going to sit on it a couple weeks because it's no rush to get to it. And then what happens is they think that, well, they're not going to call. No one's going to reach out about it. Oh, well, whatever. Let's try someone else. Well, then I'll call them out of the blue and catch them off guard. And then so after you've read what they submitted, Then you start having them, okay, tell me about your incident again. And you never embellish and tell, and try to help them along. Let them just tell it all. And what you'll find is out of 5 out of 10 reports is all of a sudden many things have changed in the narrative of the report. Like maybe the time of the day, maybe the conditions, maybe where it was at, what location, what time, it all changes. And as soon as you see that, those are red flags. If someone's had a Bigfoot report or a Bigfoot sighting, they're going to remember all those details because that's life changing. It's shocking. It blows you away. You're not going to forget it. So a lot of times you'll find people that just submit stuff just to play games, and you just thank them for your time. You don't tell them you don't believe them. You just thank them and don't call them back. A, they don't want to be found or seen. B, everything is at Bigfoot's time. So, for example, you can put all the effort that you want into your research, but if there's no big feet around, nothing's ever going to happen. C, stay true to your research area, because an area that had a sighting in 1995 might go 10, 15 years with nothing, and then all of a sudden have a week with 3 reports. So if you stay true to your location, as long as you have those things that you need, which is water, shelter, producing forest, white-tailed deer, turkey, things like that, if you're consistent and you stay true, you have a better chance of having an encounter or finding good evidence. Not a big fan of them because being a forester like I am, I was just hiking up on a ridge where the windstorm came through and it looked like a Squatch or a Godzilla went through the woods. There were so many branches, so many trees, all interwoven because of all the storm damage. So there's so much storm damage, so much ice damage in the winter that when people come into the woods, oh, look at a Squatch did this. And then I'm not saying they don't make nests from time to stay somewhere like for a night. I'm sure they do. But the fact is, too many people think every bend, every tree break is a Bigfoot, and it's a waste of time, to be honest. I mean, if it's a natural occurrence, I always say check weather reports, check history about any big storms. 2, if a Bigfoot has done it, like I remember seeing what we called a Bigfoot nest some many years ago, and there all the branches that were made in this nest to wove it together, you could physically find the tree close by where it was snapped off. Like literally, this branch was snapped from this tree. These were coming from this tree. You could see the snap points that something physically broke them off, brought them over there to make some kind of shelter. But I mean, I've only seen that twice in many years. So, I mean, it's very rare to find it, but they would do it. But like I said, I think they would make nests on the forest floor, but that's about it. I mean, it is when you're in the forest, it's the top dog. Nothing comes close. It is on top of everything. It would run circles around our best Green Berets or any of the the top military people we have. They're so smart. They're so in tune in with the environment. They know you're coming. They know your intention. And when I say your intention, think of the term buck fever. You always hear people tell the story about, oh, the biggest buck I've ever seen in my life was right in front of me, and I aimed and shot and I missed. And that's because they were so excited. Their pheromones were pouring out of their body that when they pulled the trigger, they lifted the nose of the gun up and then shot right over the top, and the deer got away. I mean, so in terms of Bigfoot, I mean, they absolutely can just do that kind of effect on people, and it's just an amazing thing, to be honest with you. Well, and also part of it is because the East Coast, especially like east of the Mississippi, let's say, at one time it was almost completely deforested down to 10%, and now, like for example, Ohio was like 8% in the early 1900s forest. Now it's sitting almost at like 38%. So when you have all this reforestation going on, so there's more shelter, and of course you have water and food and not a lot of natural predators. It's gives them kind of a population jump or spike. But in terms of like not people not seeing, why is it so hard, is because once again it goes back to them being so in tune with the environment. They know we're around. They pick our scent up far, far away. They see us far, far away. They hear our cars pull in. And so they definitely, are on top of, of what's going on in the environment. And our biggest, negativity about humanity is our technology. We're always on our phones. We're always looking at it. Do you know how many times people probably walk by a Squatch looking at their phones and never looked over? Probably many times. Most important thing is to about the only thing I could think is like, people just need to learn. If you're into Bigfoot, treat it as a hobby, because a hobby means the word fun. Have fun doing it. Get your family involved with it if you have kids, because that'll be another exciting aspect. And keep your skepticals on. You have to keep skepticism. Everything's not Bigfoot, folks. Just keep those skepticals on, and have fun doing it. Learn as you go. And I think one thing I would add in is I would highly recommend to go into your local park districts where they offer all these free classes or even inexpensive classes and learn a little bit about forestry and ecology and about what kind of food is needed for large mammals to exist. And I think you get a better understanding on what areas you want to look at or look into for possible Bigfoot activity.